Irish team named. Osborne is in at full back. Mac Hansen comes back in on the right wing. This it almost feels pre-planned rotation of minutes between the centres continues. So this time it's Ringrose at 13, Henshaw 12, James Lowe continues 11, Sam Prendergast continues at 10 alongside Gibson Park. And then front row is Porter. Dan Sheehan captains the side. Thomas Clarkson gets his first start at tight head. Joe McCarthy is alongside Tyke Byrne. And then the back row is Peter O'Mahony, Josh van der Fleer and Jack Conan. And the replacements then, Gus McCarthy, Jack Boyle, Finlay Beelum. James Ryan is on the bench. Keane Prendergast will get some Six Nations minutes. Conor Murray is on the bench. And then it's Jack Crowley and Bundy Aki. So on Sheehan, it's interesting if you'd said pre-match Peter O'Mahony is starting, you'd assume he might be the captain. Sheehan's captain Leinster twice, I think, Rory.
Yeah.
It is a rubber stamping of his stature. There is an argument he's Ireland's best player. His most the most world class of world class in his position. And being a captain in rugby is different to the sports. There's a responsibility there on the pitch, referee, various aspects. In you go.
It's part of, I think, a slow pivot towards 2027, and he has Peter O'Mahony to lean on, and that leadership, Peter O'Mahony's leadership is not diminished by not being the captain, but I did think that it would revert to Peter O'Mahony as the previous captain, as the guy who's captained teams the whole way up. Especially for Simon, I think this is a pretty bold selection, really. I know Andy Farrell will have had an input on it, but to make 7 changes when you've already lost your captain, who has played in your last 42 games, I think it's a pretty bold strategy. And to give 7 changes in total.
It's funny. Osborne in doesn't feel like a big deal. Mac Hansen comes back in. That's a strengthening. Centres, switch them all you like. It just doesn't feel like a much changed team.
Yeah, no, I know, but it would have been easy, having lost Doris and Kelleher, to just put in Conan and Sheehan, put Jack Boyle on the bench and gone, look, you know what, we're here to win it 3 in a row. We want to keep our momentum going, and we respect Wales, and we're going to go really strong. Instead, they've gone. It's a reasonably bold selection, and it's especially for an interim coach whose stock, as we know, is very high at the moment, and is a pretty pivotal moment of his coaching career, because even if he doesn't go to Wales, his leverage with the IRFU has never been higher. But I'm sure Farrell has an input. They've gone for this, and even giving Sheehan the experience of captaining the team for the first time in a Six Nations game is a big statement. But really, once it came out yesterday, you kind of go, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
He has I would have had him down as a contender to take over the captaincy on the long term along with Doris. He has the gravitas. He's a big character. He's well able to chat. He's well able to hold his own. He's obviously one of the best players in the squad. He's one of the best players in the world, and he commands respect within and without the groups. And he's a nailed on lion as long as he's fit this summer. So absolutely, if you're going forward with Caelan Doris as your captain and Dan Sheehan as his vice captain, you're in a pretty good place.
Yeah, no qualms, Eddie. I take it.
No, I kind of looked at the changes. They fell into 2 categories. There was the forced changes, with injuries, and obviously Jack Conan for Doris was a no-brainer. I still think Doris is world class. He's probably one of the best number 8s in the world at the moment, arguably. And I think Conan is a really good backup. I'm not saying Conan is as good as Doris, but Conan has been playing outstanding rugby, albeit off the bench, which is a different thing. Coming off the bench into a test game in some ways is a great place to come from. You come in, it's the last 20 minutes, you're full of beans, the opposition are getting tired, and you just throw yourself around like with abandon because there's only 20 minutes left. And Conan has taken a chance like that. He's been outstanding off the bench. Different kind of task from this weekend to build up the game, to be in the build-up, to be all part of it. The whole, that's a different kind of mental thing. So can he shine again like he's shone off the bench coming as a starter? And there's no reason to say he won't. But I think, anyway, that change was nailed on anyway, I thought, Sheehan coming in for Keller, no-brainer. Like, if Sheehan wasn't fit, he'd have been on the... If he was fit, he would have been on the team. And I think, the centre thing is, for me, is like, it doesn't matter anymore what that centre combination is. But the 2 selections to me, they're kind of where he's kind of rolled the dice a little bit, is obviously going with Clarkson to start ahead of Beelum. Beelum's so experienced now, and it's actually, to be fair to him, he's getting better as he goes. He's actually, his game has expanded as a prop. So there is a bit of a risk there. But again, they're going to look at, who we're playing against, what's the front row, what's the Welsh front row going to bring. So that would have been measured up. And the other one then is I think Jamie Osborne. That selection, that's again, we've got to find another full back for Ireland at some point. This is a good game to put him into. It's a game where we're in good fettle. It's a good Irish team. He's done well there before. If we're going to roll the dice, let's roll the dice now. So I don't. When you look at all the changes, you think, oh man, there's so many changes. It's not really that many changes, and the ones that are changes, there's only 2 risky ones, and probably the third one is Jack Boyle for Cian Healy. Like again, we're going to have to find us like Cian Healy. Like we can't keep the idea of Cian Healy comes off the bench with 10 or 15 minutes scored every game. They've got to find someone who's a genuine starter, and they've got to start somewhere. So maybe those selections are the ones where they roll the dice. I suppose Boyle ahead of Healy, Osborne and Clarkson, and Joe McCarthy probably would have started anyway if he hadn't got the bang on the head. So I don't think it's as wild a selection, and I suppose people can look at it and go, "Oh, we're getting cocky here." 7 changes going to Cardiff, But I think they're all well measured. If they're forced, they're fine, and if they're measured, I think they're good as well. Although our record in Cardiff is not good. I think we've won once there in 10 years.
Yeah, and Eddie, on this emerging generation of front rowers, then, so Clarkson gets the start at tight head, and as you mentioned there, Boyle on the bench. Gus McCarthy, we saw at hooker in November, did very well. On Clarkson, who starts at tight head, and Boyle, who'll come off the bench loose head instead of Cian Healy. Early impressions on those two?
Yeah, I think we see, like all these things, you put them in and you see how do they go. And the truth of the matter is, they've ticked the boxes as they've gone. Like they haven't come in and struggled, and you're going, "Oh, I'm not sure about this guy." They've come in, they've done their job, they've made their contribution. They didn't blow the doors off, but you don't want guys at that age coming in their first few. You don't expect them to blow the doors off. So again, they're quietly confident these guys are up to it. And then the next step is how do they fare out in a very hostile environment. And I mean, in my experience, Cardiff is one of the most hostile environments to go to. Like, it's a phenomenal stadium. There was always the fear when they knocked down the old Cardiff Arms Park, they'd never replicate the atmosphere. But by golly, they got that right. I mean, from day one, it's a very hostile cauldron. The Welsh will be obviously, losing their mind on Saturday to get something out of the game, and that includes the supporters. So it'll be a very hostile environment for those 2 players. And if they do well again there, it's another notch in their gun, The captaincy thing, I think, again, you always want a situation where you have ready-made captains. I think Doris is the nailed-on captain, but you want to build the backup scenarios. Like, I was lucky, like I had O'Driscoll. You always had someone like Paul O'Connell that was there to step in. I mean, people started, maybe he could have been captain, So that sort of depth around the captaincy is very important, so that if anything does happen, there's a guy that everyone accepts, so he's next man up for captain. And of course, you have a Mahoney there who could step into the breach as well. So I think they're just developing their depth chart at captaincy. James Ryan's another guy who's not on the field to start, but he's a captain kind of material as well. So I think that's all part of building this kind of leadership group in more depth, and Sheehan now gets to step into that role. And again, I don't know. I mean, never met Sheehan. I've never been around him, but you got to think that they really believe he's got the stuff for this, or they wouldn't make that decision. So I think that when I unpack that team in terms of changes, forced and unforced, and the captaincy, I think it all makes sense. For what's in front of them.
Yeah, Rory, you talk to people in and around the game, the sense of Boyle's game and Clarkson's game.
Yeah, like they're both slow burners. A bit harsh because they're not that old, but they both had to kind of feel their way into it. Clarkson was an excellent under-20s player at a very young age. Won a Grand Slam. Keane Tracy was writing about it last week, and he's had to bide his time at Leinster.
What age is he now?
He's 24. He's the same group, I think, as Crowley and. I could be wrong with that. He's the same group as, I think, Jack Crowley and Tom Ahern, if I'm not wrong. He is very, very solid. I don't think he's going to be a dominant scrummager in the way maybe Tyke Furlong can be, or Andrew Porter at aggressiveness. But when he gets locked into that position, he doesn't generally move. Now, if he's playing against France in 2 weeks' time, you would wonder, because that's a step up. But having even Rabah Slimani around this season, Leinster have shared the minutes. Obviously, Furlong's had a lot of injuries. He's had a lot more exposure this year. Boyle is a year or two younger, strong as an ox. He has a younger brother coming through who's still quite young, but is apparently the rock star of the Leinster schools scene at the moment at 15 or 16.
He's a number 8, and apparently he could play international rugby tomorrow.
Yeah, he's getting there. So I mean, not to overhype a young guy, but like the genes are obviously very good. Yeah. And when he went in November, he was brought in as kind of one of these development players, but they really liked him. They really got a sense that this guy has what it takes to fill a very important slot, because Cian Healy has indicated this is probably his last season. I have thought the 2 cameos Healy has had in this campaign, the games have both been put to bed, but I think he struggled at this level. I think he can still do it probably provincial level, but when he goes up to international, that increase in pace, it's starting to look like it's kind of catching up with him eventually, and it was always going to. That's a real high importance position for Ireland to fill, is that reserve tight or loose head position, because Andrew Porter will get injured at some stage, and if he does, that's catastrophe. So they're hoping that Boyle will be able to step in and step up, and the indications are from Leinster that he will. I almost thought they might go for the approach that Leinster took and start them for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and bring Porter on. Instead, they've decided to give him his bench, select him off the bench. Even the fact that they picked McCarthy behind Clarkson, McCarthy's 120 kilos. He's the biggest lock Ireland have. He'll support them hugely. Bealham will come on then with a bit of experience alongside the 2, Gus McCarthy and Jack Boyle. And James Ryan and Bealham would have a good kind of working relationship there on that side of the scrum as well. So there's a bit of smartness to the way they've picked it as well. But yeah, I think Boyle is ready, and we won't know if he's properly ready until we actually see him out there. Wales wouldn't be the most formidable scrummaging side either, but they have picked an all-new front row for this game, and they've a bit of experience and a bit of nous in there. So Clarkson will be under pressure.
Okay. Well, again, starting team is Porter, no problems. Dan Sheehan, no problems. Clarkson alongside them. And then Gus McCarthy off the bench, Boyle and Bealham. So it's kind of a strange game to preview, Eddie. Like, Wales are 25-1 in a 2-horse race.
Yeah, it's a no-win game for Ireland, in a sense that if you win, everyone says, well, what do you expect? You should have won. And if you lose, it's a disaster. I mean, it just derails a Grand Slam possibility. And possibly you still have to play France. But again, and it's, I mean, I know for a fact that the team won't get into this mode, but Irish people will tend to get into the mode that, this is something we just put to bed early in Cardiff on Saturday, and then we rock on to the real game is against France. And I can't imagine for a second that in the Irish camp that notion has even entered people's heads. It is a tricky one in that sense. Now, as you always say, if you said to me who's going to win, like I said before the Scotland game, if Ireland played the par, we win. But to play the par in that environment with team who are like nothing to lose and just throwing the kitchen sink at you is going to be a pretty good test. And a lot will depend on how we start in the first 20 minutes. Like if we get off to a good start like we did in Murrayfield, I think it'll be just, pedal to the metal and drive on. But if for some reason, coming to half time, it's a 1-score game and the crowd are getting into it, and then you pick up a yellow card or a few penalties, like that really bad patch we had of in Murrayfield, like the minute before half time, it should have been a standard exit, red clocks in the red, going at half time, we give up a try. And then to start the second half, we got rolled a couple of times and we got 2 penalties and the crowd got into it. And we steadied the ship. We don't want to be in that situation. So there are banana skins there for us. But I think, again, it's a test of our ability to avoid those. A really good team doesn't stand on bananas at key moments. And I think this game has its challenges, but it all comes down to us, not them. I think we play the par, we win. But there's always that chance that things go a little awry and the crowd get into it, or you get a yellow card at the wrong time or a red card, and then the game's in the hopper. And our record in Cardiff, as I said a while ago, is not great. I think Wales won in 15. I'm talking about Six Nations games now. I'm not talking about anything else like the autumn series written. Wales won in 15, 17, 19, and 21. If my records are right, and we won in 23.
Yeah.
But it's always been a tough place to go.
Destroyed them in 23, it's worth reiterating. Destroyed them. And that 21 team is such a long, long way in the rearview mirror.
And Peter O'Mahony got a red card in the early stages of that game, so that turned it on its head. But
Matt Sherritt's come in as interim, very much interim. It's 3 games only. He's kind
every interim coach is just very much interim until they get a couple of results, and then they suddenly become that.
Well, if he wins Saturday, he can throw his hat in the ring. He's talked about as kind of a boots on the grass coach as opposed to a director of rugby type. He has brought Anscombe back in at 10, which can't hurt. It's difficult to overstate how bad Wales were, not just in Paris, but also in Rome. Like that was a deceiving scoreline. Italy controlled the whole game until they just kind of froze a little bit and wanted the finish line to come to them as opposed to run to it. Like they were just dreadful. Like they were, and the worrying thing is they were actually, in fairness to them, committed. So it's not even like Sherrick can show up and say, guys, if we just physically get up to it, we'll be a lot better straight away. They gave it a good go. They just did nothing in attack, not much in defence. No. Like how many lines will they have?
You're into the kind of territory.
I don't want to land you in a Daily Telegraph article again.
No, I've already had one of those today.
I know you have.
Like, I think sometimes we'll be accused of arrogance when we're talking about this. But if Wales aren't looking in, and they are, like Wales are fully aware.
We're not talking about how great we are. I'm talking about how bad Wales are.
And I don't think it's a good thing. I think as the nearest neighbours, well, one of the nearest neighbours to Wales, Ireland could do with a thriving Welsh team to kind of, and the tournament and all that sort of stuff. But that's, not to sound patronizing. This is a great rugby nation that's currently in a grave decline. And I think Scotland are in danger of heading this way once a couple of their leading lights retire in the next couple of years. Because if you look at the under-20 results over the last couple of years, Scotland are in an even worse place than Wales in terms of talent ID and player development. Wales are, and this is, I guess, it's a warning for Irish rugby, albeit it's one I think they're heeding at the moment, that if you get things wrong, and really Irish rugby is only getting it right in fundamentally right in one part of the game, which is Leinster, and we're reaping the rewards of that. But if you take your eye off the ball, and if you start becoming a bit more middling, you lose investment, you lose sponsorship, you lose interest. Apparently there's going to be loads of Irish fans there on Saturday because while it's sold out, a lot of the tickets have ended up in Irish hands. There's a lot of people going over. It's not like local interest in the Welsh rugby team, understandably, after 14 defeats in a row, is at an all-time low.
Right.
And while we can make an argument that Wales will be emotional and passionate, and they've picked a better and more experienced team, and they've there's a bit of a strategy there to limit Ireland, it's very hard to make a reasonable case to that they can win this game. That for your first win in 15 internationals to be against one of the top two most consistent teams in the world is a massive stretch. They will have to do something remarkable, and Ireland would have to do something remarkable. And 2 years ago, I remember being in Portugal, and Ireland were really nervous because it was Gatland's first game back, and they were on edge all week.
And he brought back some
a few of the big hitters, and there was a real edge around Ireland's camp, and they were we were getting thrown out of training, and there was all sorts of stuff going on, and they absolutely turned up in that first 20 minutes, and they put the whole thing to bed. And if you think about all the motivation that's there for Ireland, because complacency is the great enemy this week, but there's a Triple Crown to be won on the day. They all want to play against France in a Grand Slam decider, what we think will be a Grand Slam decider in 2 weeks' time. There's 7 players who've brought in. They've no guarantee that anyone will be playing against France unless they play out of their skin. Even Joe McCarthy, if he needs a 9 out of 10 to stop James Ryan coming back in. So there's both personal motivation and collective motivation. And then there's also the fact that Easterby, that they're playing for this coach who obviously lives in Wales, knows Wales, and will prepare them completely for the emotional kind of reaction that they're getting. So I expect an Irish performance, and if Ireland perform, even with the new coach bounce and all that sort of stuff, it might be narrower, and the spread is into 24 points now from 25, they've beaten them by 24 the last 2 years. It might be a bit tighter than that, and if it does go into a tight game, Ireland's bench doesn't bang in the way that the bench did against England or Scotland. There's a little less experience there, a little less punch, and the fact that you have Sheehan and Conan in the starting team.
Yeah.
But even still, it's very hard to make a case for a Wales win.
Eddie, if you're Matt Sherritt, you'll certainly have the attention of the room. They'll be desperate for a new idea. It's nice to wipe the slate clean. There's no doubt it's going to be an emotional stadium and an emotionally fired up Wales. But just, you're the coach from a tactical point of view. You have 4 or 5 days here. What kind of stuff can you implement? Where do you go with 5 days?
Just before I answer, I think your point was very made about this Welsh team. I think they did play their hearts out in the first 2 games.
Yeah.
There was no sense of complacency, or they were, coming off the gas in their physicality. and they had every case to, because they were playing so badly, they were getting pounded. But I think what Charlotte has to do is, because he doesn't have the horses now, and this is what surprised me or disappointed me with Wales over the last couple of seasons, is they didn't have the horses, they didn't have the players, and they went out and they did what everybody else did. There was zero innovation. It was just like they ran the same attack, they ran the same defense. So if you're playing a team that's better than you, and you sit down, you look at it, and you line them up, and you go like, we pick the best 15 players out of 30, we wouldn't get too many starters, So you're behind the 8 ball, and you go out and you do exactly as they do. The odds are they're going to do it better than you, and you lose. So in Charlotte's situation, you go out and you start to create a little bit of energy, a little bit of development, a little bit of something new, and you start throwing curveballs at Ireland. Maybe you do, 3-man lineouts instead of 5s. Maybe you do dummy drives a lot more. You go to short side, you bounce back to short side. You just change the game. What Ireland analysed in the build up to this game bears very little resemblance to what you're doing on the day. That's your best shot. It's your best shot. I mean, probably historically the coach that was most famous for that was Ian McGeechan.
Right.
When he had the Scotland teams that won the Grand Slam and they used to beat England, he was great for coming into camp with a few new ideas, and he energised everybody around those. And nobody had seen him. And on the day they tripped teams up. Now that's much harder to do in the professional era. Let's be honest. But I think Charlotte has to bring something new to the table. If Charlotte goes in and runs the same attacking strategies and defensive strategies that Gordon Gatlin ran and hope we're going to be better at it, I think that's a very flawed. And I think if he did that, if he came out of the box with stuff and he threw curveballs at Ireland and, challenged them and upset them, I think that would energise the team, would give him a chance of maybe pulling off a shock. But I think if I was in his shoes, that's what I'd be doing. And it's a new voice in the room as well. It's not a hard thing to do if you're the new voice in the room. And obviously, for him, I think his background is attack. He's an attack-minded coach. He's a hands-on coach, a grass under his feet type coach. So maybe he's the type of coach that Wales need at the moment, just to get him, through the rest of the Six Nations and then take a breath. But that's what I'd be doing if I was him. I'd be upsetting the apple cart by throwing curveballs left, right, and centre any way I could. And that might be his best shot at a shock of the season.
He's also, I think, going to just go after the Irish ball in the way they are. Like, by picking Reffel and Morgan, he's a bit like Steve Borthwick did a couple of weeks ago. He's nailing his colours to the mast about what they want to do without the ball, and they've probably seen not many teams are able to do it. But if you can slow down either Leinster or Ireland's ball, then it's an obvious point. But it makes Gibson Park less effective. It means Prendergast is under more pressure. It means your defensive line is able to get in their faces a bit quicker, and it makes Ireland look like a more ordinary team. So Ireland, whether it's the ball carrier, whether it's the first arriver, someone like Joe McCarthy clearing that ruck, they need to be right on it from the moment, from the word go, because Reffel is very good over the ball. We've seen that for Leicester against Leinster in moments, and Morgan has been one of the players of the championship in a terrible team. So if the two of them can get on top at the breakdown, you can see how that might stifle Ireland to some degree. But again, a little bit like England, you're borrowing from your line out to do that. So will you get any supply of possession if Ireland are able to compete? Now Ireland, by picking McCarthy, are probably weakening their line out to some degree as well. So maybe there's a trade-off there. But that's an obvious avenue. I think teams are going to increasingly go after Ireland in that area, and Ireland just have to be ready for it.
Yeah.
I think that if you look at Ireland's forward selection, I think this is a very quick Irish pack. Like look, Sheehan is electric for a hooker. He's as quick as most centres. And then you've got Ty Byrne, who's a back rower, really. He's a tweener, but very comfortable in the back row. Peter O'Mahony, a loose forward. Van der Fleer, open side. And Conan's quick. So I think we're kind of insulating ourselves a little bit against their kind of disruptive game by having a very quick back row, quick to the breakdown, quick to seal off the ball and keep the ball moving. So there's an element of that maybe in the selection as well. It's a pretty lively Irish pack to go to war with. And of course you have McCarthy and there's the enforcer. Porter's been playing fantastic dynamic rugby as well, like as a ball carrier and otherwise. I was watching him even one of the breaks against Scotland. I think it was when the Robbie Henshaw came out of the line and he got scorched.
Yeah.
I mean, Porter chasing back, man, he was like a demon possessed. He was running the same speed as everybody else. So that this Irish pack are very mobile, and I think that's probably where they see that if Wales come after the breakdown, they're well equipped to deal with it. That we have we've good groundhogs on the field on the day.
If I had to push you both for a scoreline prediction,
I think between 15 and 20 will be a reasonably good day at the office with the changes. Just keep the momentum going and sail over to France.
yeah, that's how you see it, Eddie.
I'd say a 3-score win. Like going into the last, 10, 15 minutes, we're 3 scores ahead. The game is done. That would be a really good performance for us in the circumstances. You don't want a 1-score game with 10 minutes left away from home.